Despite going back all the way to the 1960s, Spider-Man is also a hero who knows a thing or two about the future. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. This is Top 10 Nerd and I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Today we'll be counting down the top 10 alternate future versions of Spider-Man. Number 10. Peter B. Parker. This alternate future version of Peter Parker hails from the Into the Spider-Verse multiverse. He is the older, mid-30s to approaching perhaps middle-aged Spider-Man, also known as Peter B. Parker, with the B in his name presumably standing for Benjamin, like the main continuity Peter of 616. In this reality, Peter is all grown up. He settles down with MJ only to later get divorced as Mary Jane wanted kids but Peter wasn't ready. It's clear that this Peter Parker regrets some of his life choices, namely hurting MJ, and wants her back. He is pulled into Miles' reality thanks to Kingpin's Super Colliders experiments. Peter attempts to train Miles while also teaming up with him to defeat Kingpin and return both himself and the other alternate Spider folks back to their home realities before it's too late. Number 9. Officer Parker. In the alternate future of Earth X, Peter and Mary Jane's daughter May does not die and instead lives, growing up to become that reality's Venom. MJ dies of cancer before things start to get wild on Earth X, leaving Peter to take care of his daughter alone. Their relationship becomes strained as Peter doesn't believe that May can actually control the symbiote, when in reality, she can. In this future, Peter's identity is also revealed to the public by Norman Osborn when he takes over the Daily Bugle, which also runs the paper out of business due to the revelation that the hero they called a supposed menace had been on their payroll the whole time. Eventually, Peter is convinced to join the New York police force by Luke Cage, and he works hard to protect the people of New York and later their scarce food supply, when the polls are reversed and New York freezes over as a result. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about future alternate versions of Spidey, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Final Stand Spider-Man. Not all future Spider-Men finish life happy, and not all of them even are still considered heroes in the end. With Final Stand Spider-Man, the world is a lot more bleak in this future. This is an alternate future version of Peter Parker from a possible future that Madam Web gets a glimpse into. Here, Peter Parker ends up killing Kraven the Hunter and goes on to kill Dr. Octopus. He ends up betraying those he loves, and in the end, when the NYPD hunt him down, giving him an opportunity to surrender and admit to his crimes, Spider-Man refuses. He is shot and killed in this final stand. Number 7. Avengers Forever. This is actually a version of future Spider-Man often referred to as Spider-Man 2099. Not the Spider-Man 2099 though, as I said, this is an alternate version of that alternate version of Spider-Man. This Spider-Man 2099 is still Miguel O'Hara, but instead of hailing from the 2099 reality of Earth 928, this version of Miguel hails from the reality of Earth 98120, as seen in the 90s comic series Avengers Forever. In this alternate future, Miguel ends up joining the Avengers, but unfortunately later meets his end at the totemic life force draining hands of Morlun the Inheritor during the Spider-Verse event. Number 6. The CEO. As we said before, not all future versions of Spider-Man are heroes. Case in point, the Peter Parker who is still alive in 2099, as seen in the story from the 2011 video game, Spider-Man Edge of Time. Here, Peter Parker lives on to the year 2099 thanks to anti-aging tech. He fakes his own death as Spider-Man and operates in the shadows, becoming the CEO of the company Alchemex. He is one of the villains of the game who Spider-Man 2099 Miguel O'Hara must face in the end. Although Peter ends up a secret antagonist and villain, his goal at least is somewhat altruistic here. Peter wants to rewrite the timeline so that he can bring back all those that he's lost during his time as a hero. In the end, this Peter presumably gets erased from the time stream after a younger version of Peter Parker is convinced to not go down this path and never become the CEO of Alchemex. Number 5. Spider-Man 2211. Spider-Man 2211 is like Spider-Man 2099, but from even farther into the future. He is known as a time spinner and does his best to protect the time field. This version of Spider-Man is named Max Bourne, and his appearance also differs from the Spider-Man of Earth 616 and the Spider-Man of 2099 in the regard that his costume has multiple mechanized arms. Kinda like Dr. Octopus, or more specifically Dr. Octopus's look when he became Spider-Man and was known as Superior Spider-Man. Max Bourne Byrne's arch nemesis is Hobgoblin of 2211, who it turns out is actually his own daughter, Robin. Gasp. Along with Spider-Man of 616 and Spider-Man of 2099, he faces and defeats Hobgoblin only for her true identity to be revealed to him. Number 4. Reign. Specifically, Spider-Man Reign. This future version of Spider-Man hails from an even bleaker reality than Final Stand Spider-Man, hailing from the comic known as Spider-Man Reign. Here, Peter ends up working at a flower shop after years of being a hero. No longer operating as Spider-Man, this version of Peter has become somewhat senile, frail, and old. He is also haunted by his past, having hallucinations of Mary Jane, who is now long dead. Mary Jane in this reality apparently died from being close to Peter, which he carries immense guilt over. Apparently his radioactiveness was not so good for MJ's body, ended up giving her cancer and sadly killed her in the end. Peter eventually does return to heroics, but even then it's a pretty sad return, with him mostly getting his butt whooped when he isn't busy being swept up in some kind of fantasy or hallucination of his past. Number 3. MC2. In the MC2 reality of Earth 982, Peter Parker actually gets to grow up and settle down with MJ. The two do end up married with kids, with daughter May, Mayday Parker, successfully being born. May grows up to have spider powers like her dad and eventually becomes known as the hero Spider-Girl, living up to her family legacy and becoming a hero in her own right herself. Peter and MJ in this reality also have another child, May's younger brother Benji. Benji as a youngster also displays abilities and powers. He also goes on to have an adventure as a little tyke with Carnage, unintentionally bonding with the symbiote. Fortunately, his older sister May is able to save him, although for a time Ben would actually suffer from permanent hearing loss as a result of that rescue. Number 2. Gerry Drew. In the same future that MC2 Peter hails from, known as the alternate reality of Earth 982, Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, also has a child. MC2 is notoriously known for being the reality where superheroes get to grow up, retire, or settle down to live a somewhat normal life, possibly amidst continued heroics for those, of course, who don't retire. As such, Jessica is also one of those heroes. She gets married and ends up pregnant, but unfortunately her son Gerry is born with a rare bloodborne illness. In an attempt to cure Gerry, Jessica submits him to the same experimentation which saved her as a child and also gave her spider powers. The same happens to Gerry, who also gets spider powers and ends up becoming a hero, taking up the mantle Spider-Man, after being inspired by stories that his mom tells him of her days as a hero and of Spider-Man's adventures. Number 1. Spider-Man 2099. What would a future Spider-Man list be without the future Spider-Man? That's right, we're talking about Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099. Or just Spider-Man really, as he's known in his own world, because it is 2099, so people don't just go like, hey, that's that hero 2099 and that's that villain 2099. 2099 is often thought of as being the future for the main comic book continuity of Earth 616. Here Miguel wasn't always actually the most altruistic guy, which I think is part of what makes him so cool as a character. He's got flaws. And becoming Spider-Man is part of his journey to becoming a better person. He becomes better as an individual as he becomes a hero. Miguel also comes with a futuristic look and some future tech as well. He got powers after submitting himself to his own experiments in the hopes of ridding himself of an addiction that was forced on him by the company he worked for, Alchemex, in order to prevent him from quitting. That's a pretty intense way to try to get someone to not quit. Be like, well, we create this substance and we're gonna give it to you without you knowing, and now you have an addiction to it, and now you have to keep working for us if you want that thing. So there you go. But thank goodness Miguel found a way around that. What are some of your favorite future versions of Spider-Man? If you could pick which alternate future the Marvel comic book universe or Marvel Cinematic Universe turned into, which one would you want to see each become and why? Let us know in the comments below. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight. I'll see you in the next video, but until then, you stay nerdy, YouTube.